Hi everyone, and welcome to my review of Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat. Yes, in 1944. So this is a film, I have it here on Blu-ray, Masters of Cinema, number 30, that is. And yes, this is one of the Hitchcock films that I was actually meaning to watch around about 4 years ago. But I nearly watched it. I didn't quite get to it. And yeah, I just last year I think it was, I bought the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray. And I thought, yeah, I'll watch that once I've seen a couple of the other ones. Really looked forward to it, it intrigued me a lot. I really love, I'll get it out of the way, I love a lot of films that are in one location. Reservoir Dogs, although, there's quite a few other bits, flashbacks and stuff. It's not all in that warehouse, but most of it is. Rear Window, pretty much is, in the apartment. Love that film, of course. Rope, I recently reviewed that. There's so many films, even Darwin for Murder, it's mostly in the house inside the apartment. But there's just so many films, and I was really looking forward to this. However, did have my doubts. It's meant. I heard it had been, of course, Lifeboat. Set in the water and stuff, and there's something about actually. I think one of the most riskiest moves is to make a film based in water, on the water. Jaws, I commend Spielberg even more for Jaws, it's a masterpiece, Jaws, I'll get out of the way. That's a spoiler for my review, but, it's such a risky film though, when you think about it. And I always think that things, films that are set around, around the water and stuff, they can be really, really bad actually, and it's very hard, and it's just because sometimes just the water, the nature of it, and stuff, and it can slow things down, and it can just make things quite boring, and that's just a feeling I have. I would never personally, when I make a film, well, I would never, at the top of my list would never be a film based around the water and stuff. It's just, and Spielberg, of course, had many issues on Jaws filming it as well. But, it pulled off, of course. That's one of the exceptions, because usually I do not like a lot of films that are around the water, based around the water and stuff. I just think it's just really not a great way, certainly for traditionally for cinema to take place for me, and so I did have some doubts, I did have some doubts in that sense. But, I look forward to it, put it on tonight, and wow, it's the first Hitchcock film, unfortunately, and I really am saddened by this, that I do not like at all. I cannot even give it a like. I have actually reviewed, I think 6 Hitchcock films on this channel, prior to this, and I've given them all, I believe, 100% plus. They're in my tiers of 100% plus. The highest was a tier 2, from a couple of them, and then, To Catch a Thief and stuff was a tier 3. Absolutely loved them all, and prior to this I'd seen 16 Hitchcocks. I loved 15 of them, out of the 16, and I really liked that other one. I still really liked it. I thought it was a really, really good film at least, and this is just a massive dip. It's 1944, so to put it into context, a couple of films that came after this was like Notorious, Rope, and then a few that came before, Shadow of a Doubt, Rebecca, Lady Vanishes a bit before that. So this is sandwiched in between a lot of great films, some of the best of all time I've mentioned. And it just, the first thing, it just does not feel like a Hitchcock film. It really sells it on the back. This is my opinion, of course. There's a lot of people that love this film. It says, consistently inventive, beautifully paced. And it would foreshadow experience of Rope and Darwin for Murder. I wouldn't call Rope an experimental film just because of how great it is, the execution. This really does feel experimental. It shows, it just feels like, not that he didn't know what he was doing, but I just felt he didn't care. I personally feel that there was not a lot of passion that went into this film, and I am a massive supporter of Hitchcock. One of my top 5 directors forever. That will never change. He's right next to, he's right up there with my favourites. And I cannot stress that enough. Some of the films as well that people hate on, and people just, stuff of Hitchcock I absolutely love. I think The Trouble with Harry is one of the most underrated films probably ever made. To Catch a Thief, I think, as well, is up there with that. But really, this just doesn't feel like. First of all, it doesn't feel like a Hitchcock, and it just doesn't feel like what I feel it should, be. It's not tense. It says on the back how intense this film is. I don't feel that this is an effective thriller. So the opening, it's basically the story is Americans and British boats and stuff. They get attacked by these German boats because it's set in World War Two. They get attacked and then they're shipwrecked and everything, and they all clamber onto this boat basically one by one in the first 10 minutes, and you've got one of the first characters in it. It's this woman. She was okay at first. She started off quite a character. Unfortunately, she just goes down into what this film does. So it doesn't set it up very well at all. Very very bland and uninspired setup of them just sort of swimming in. They all get on the boat, and it could have been done great. It could have been done where the first couple of characters get on. They meet up, and then the other people that swim on, they start affecting the dynamics of the group in a meaningful way. Like it should be done. Unfortunately, on their own, some of these characters, apart from that the first woman, they're not interested. They're not got very great dialogue to be said. They're not set up in a meaningful way, and then when they all come on, no one's really been set up. And then there's loads of characters. There's around about 10 characters to begin with, and it's like they're all on this boat, and none of them are that interested. Things slightly pick up a tiny bit after the half an hour mark, but the first half an hour, to sum it up, was very, very bland. Boring. Characters I didn't care for. And this is set on this one boat. And unfortunately, to make matters worse, I'm also not, as I've said, I'm not a massive fan of things set in the water and stuff. The fact is, it's not even shot really in a meaningful way. It's not inventive, I don't think, and it says that on the back. This is my personal thoughts. It's for me not inventive the way it's shot. It's just very, very, very amateur, and that's not Hitchcock. Certainly not at that time. He had already established himself to be one of the greats. In fact, at the time, before guys like Kubrick and that came in, the only other director who was on his level for me was Chaplin. And yes, it doesn't feel like him, and it's very, very amateur, as I've said. It's just, it's not even framed well, and it's just basically someone shooting in a very uninventive way. Them all crammed in, very theatrical on stage. Them just talking in a boring way. It's not inventive, and there's not any sort of other perspective shots really. There's some decent cinematography where he plays around with light and shadows and the way the water sprays and everything, but practical effects. But generally, it's not even shot in a way that is involving. The pure cinematics that he was always very much a kind of a filmmaker who would actually specialise in that and would perfect it more than most. The simplicity of cinema and the pure cinematics, as his career went on, mostly in the 50s onwards he would do that, even more so. But Notorious, and before this, of course, Rebecca and stuff like that, and it's just stunning, in that sense. This film feels very, very flat, unfortunately, and of course he used rear screen projections and stuff, and he doesn't do anything to kind of play with that. It could have been done in a great way, like all of his other films that I've seen. The cinematography and everything is stunning, the way he uses backdrops and everything. In this, it doesn't add anything. That's the thing. This is, an experimental film. Rope was something that really just, it was so unique, and the way he went, very, very unique film, and he used it all, in a way that was stood out. All the stuff, the fact that it appeared to be what continuous takes and everything like that, and the rope was the kind of one of the characters, you could say. In this, it's just literally they're on a lifeboat. The backdrop is the water, the sea, and nothing. It does not add anything to it. Like a lot of one location films feel very claustrophobic. It doesn't really feel like that. It doesn't heighten the tension, and the fact combined with there's no interesting characters for me really. No one of worth really. There's a couple moments here and there that Well, they've got some good lines, and yeah, it's quite charming. A couple of moments that is literally less than a minute at a time that happens. A couple of moments throughout the film. It just adds up to a thriller that I don't care for, really. I'm not saying it's an awful film. It's not a bad film for me, quite. But yeah, we'll get to what I give it. But yes, there's no real soundtrack either, to be honest. So there's none of that. There's no. The dialogue in this film mostly is pretty poor. It's not got kinetic. It's not. It doesn't bounce off. What I found with this film actually is, and it can work sometimes to add realism, but the people just talked over each other a lot of the time. There's quite a few characters on the boat, and they were just sort of very, very talky film, and that's fine, especially if it's one location. It's different with Rear Window because he was looking out other things, and most of the film was him, voyeurism. That's just reaction shots and stuff. But in this, of course, yes, it would make sense. There's a lot of dialogue, but unfortunately, it's not compelling. That's the thing, and it's very, very talky, and they're over talking each other, and it's just poorly handled. It feels very, very amateur, as I've said. Just the script and the characters and everything. The acting performances are really, really hammy as well. And I've seen all the Hitchcock films I've seen. There's just great acting in them, at least from a few of the characters. And most of the films, all the characters are great in it. But in this film, there's not really a performance that's good. They're all pretty crap, and it just doesn't feel like, it just feels the most B film that I've seen of him. It doesn't feel, and a film can have a low budget. It had a decent budget. Didn't do well at the box office though, so there's no excuse there. And it was at one location, so it felt very, very straight to TV kind of thing. I'm not sure, really about its release and stuff. Not really looked into it too much, but it just feels like one of them films that's just, like now if you see the Sci-Fi Channel, it shows different films that straight to the TV and they're crap. I'm not saying it's a bad film, but it has that feel to it, very amateur, very B grade. And Hitchcock could always elevate this sort of thing, but it just doesn't happen here. And it's 98 minutes. And it's just it's not paced well because there's just nothing really. It's just very, very repetitive. Unfortunately, it doesn't act like Rope, where it's just complete build of tension throughout the entire film, the 80 minutes. It doesn't progress really. It's all over the place, and it's not a film that is like a chamber box tension thing. It's not tense, It's very flat, unfortunately, my opinion. It just didn't compel me, unfortunately. We'll kind of wrap up because it just, as well, it's quite offensive. I won't go into why. You'll watch it and find out. I don't want to get into that, but it's not a film that has much heart either, unfortunately. And that's a real shame. Hitchcock really always did. A lot of people don't see that, sometimes, but it's very, very, very much there in all the films I've seen of him. And as well, I'd highly recommend, of course, Hitchcock films. He's one of the greatest, and this collection in particular is just stunning. So overall, Lifeboat is a massive disappointment, and I think, I don't think it's quite a bad film, but I think it's very weak, and I think, unfortunately, I'd have to give it a 46%, and that's extremely low for me. But overall, I just felt, it's a film that just doesn't really work for me. There's some. It's hard, a lot of people said this is one of his most underrated films, and of course I'm kind of, in minority really, because it's quite a popular film now, and but I'm one of them people that really have loved most of the Hitchcocks I've seen, and films like The Man Who Knew Too Much remake, Trouble with Harry, all these ones, To Catch a Thief, I've absolutely adored. So I'm not someone that, is not a fan of Hitchcock. I am very much obsessed with Hitchcock films, but this one just doesn't do it for me, and I really would be shocked if I like a film less than this of his. Even Topaz, I know everyone that it's the least popular film of his. I've not seen it, and I don't expect much at all from it. But really, this is just the one that I think it might be a special case for me, and it's, you know, it's everything I feared really with the kind of on the water kind of location, everything, and just what it could have turned into, and a bit more actually. I didn't expect it to be this low, but yeah, it's a weak film from me, and it's a real shame. You know, I absolutely love Hitchcock films. You know, this doesn't feel Hitchcockian. It doesn't have a lot of the trademarks really till the end. You know, there's some things to praise at the end. You know, and you know, when they start showing a bit of their family and photographs and stuff. But most of it, as I said, most of the film doesn't have meaningful character development. Doesn't have compelling characters at all. These are unlikable people that aren't written well, unfortunately, and not, you know, not good performances. It doesn't have an energy to it. It doesn't have a zest. It doesn't have a drive, really at all. And the actual location of it could have heightened the tension, but really there was no tension to begin with, and it didn't have that effect. Actually, it didn't heighten tension for me. You know, and it was quite offensive. It didn't really have that much humanity, and it was a bit heavy-handed in its themes. You know, but there were some things to praise. You know, some of the cinematography, some of the moments here and there, and just generally it just isn't lower because it is not quite an awful film or anything like that. It's just such a disappointment. You know, I just didn't care for it though. That's the thing. I was bored. I didn't get compelled by the characters. I didn't feel it. It felt like a film that he really cared for. You know, that personal. That's as a viewer that I didn't get that. You know, I didn't get the passion that's always prevalent in his films. I didn't get, you know, emotionally attached to any of it. I didn't get elevated. You know, it just was a very, very basic film on every level, really. Apart from, I'd say some of the shadows and stuff. That was some of the stuff that impressed me. I could take that away, but even the camera moves and everything are a bit basic. You know, a bit flat. Yeah, it's a limited way. You know, it is limited in the way that it is one location sometimes. But look at Rear Window. You know, look at Rope. There's not really an excuse in that sense, and I know they came after this, and maybe this was, you know, of course, is the first one where it was a Hitchcock kind of one location in that sense. I'm pretty sure, but still no excuse. You know, he made many great films before this, and this is certainly not great for me. You know, it's quite often now put in the top 20 Hitchcocks. I would struggle to see maybe more than one film of his that I would like less than this. I do not like it. I didn't feel for it, didn't care for it, and massive respect to Hitchcock. You know, he's one of my idols, and he's one of the masters for me, one of the absolute best. But, you know, on this occasion, sorry, I didn't like it. You know, a shame. But, you know, I gave it a go, and yeah, it's just fine because, you know, I have seen quite a few of the ones that aren't acclaimed, and I absolutely love them. So I'm not too bothered really, and it didn't anger me in the way that, you know, because I just didn't feel as much care put into it as much as these other ones, you know, and that's just how I feel. So I didn't get angry in that sense. But yeah, no, it's a special case probably. Who knows? But yeah, I'll be watching another one soon of Hitchcock probably. But thanks for watching my review of Lifeboat. Not an impressive film for me, but check it out. You know, you might like it. You probably will because most people do. But it's just, yeah, really shocking actually. It's one-off case though, hopefully, really, you know, and his acclaimed ones. But yes, thanks for watching my review.